Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jay Rosenblatt, JFI Program Director. And just a few items before we get started. Just so you all know, there are chat and Q&A options at the bottom of your screen. And Matt here is doing ASL interpretation. And we also have closed captioning if you need it. And there's a button at the bottom of your screen that says closed caption for that. And now I'd like to welcome back directors Veronica Selver and Susan Fanshel. Hey.
Okay.
All right, very good.
So mysterious.
So far, so good, right? So, first of all, congratulations on this amazing film that you've both created. To me, it makes so much sense that this film was made by two editors. Every shot on the screen is just the right amount of time, and the film itself is the perfect length. And I have to say that's rare, and I love that aspect. And that's just one of the many things I love about this film. The archival images are wonderful. Cappy's artwork is amazing. I could go on and on, but I want to ask you a bunch of questions before we open it up to our audience. Before I do that, is there anything either of you or both of you want to say?
Well, I would like to say it was just thrilling to imagine, to understand that others are seeing this. You know, usually it's just us seeing it, and the idea that other people are looking at it at the same time is just very exciting.
Susan, anything?
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, this is a whole new way, world premiere online. It's just amazing. I mean, there's so many people that signed up for this, and I'm so excited to hear from them. But let me ask you a few questions first, okay? I was wondering if you could first talk about your collaboration and how you both split the directorial and the editing duties. Can you talk about that?
Well, one thing I'd like to say is that we really didn't split those duties, really. I mean, because Susan came into the project a little later, I had already shot some of the interviews. So in that respect, I had already made some decisions about who would be filmed and that. But in terms of saying you do this and I do that, I mean, it was a very, very fluid experience between us. I would say that since I began, some of the editing happened at the beginning was mine, but that Susan was really the masterful editor of this. I would say that as time went on, Susan really did the editing. I mean, I was still there and doing it with her, but wouldn't you agree, Susan?
Oh, well, I know I wouldn't have said that. Somehow at a certain point after time, you know, enough time went by because really we worked on it for quite a long time, but we were on some wavelength together and maybe I executed some things, but there was always a back and forth over everything. So it's hard for me to separate, you know, what I did, and I can't even remember, really.
How long did you guys work on this?
Well, probably 4 years.
Wow.
Is that possible? Maybe somewhere, yeah. And I'm talking working together.
Right.
Yeah.
You've been working on this film your whole life, Veronica, right?
Well, I did bring my life to it.
Right. Actually, that's my next question was, Veronica, since this is so personal for you. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the challenges and decisions on just how personal to make it. And Susan, I'm wondering how you may have helped in this regard, because sometimes, as I know myself, making a personal film, you really need outside people because sometimes it's too, inside.
Well, one thing that I would like to say is that as much as possible, I wanted it, I speak in the I form, but it's such a fluid thing between us, but I wanted it to be my mother's story. I did not want it to be the story of how we experienced our mother, and particularly, I mean, I wanted the focus to be on IRMI. And in that respect, I feel that both Irene and I are pretty contained in a certain way in the amount of personal we could have brought to it. I think we did, but I wanted the focus to be on IRMI. Does that answer?
Yeah, sure. I was wondering if Susan, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Or?
No, I think that I did have a certain amount of a role in being able to stand back more, even though I knew IRMI very well for many years, because Veronica and I have, and Irene, very much this, we all met in high school, and we continued to have a friendship that was never broken in time. So I did know IRMI, and I did know many of the people who made up this story. However, because it wasn't my mother, and because I had a certain amount of filmmaking head going on, I think I did have a little bit of perspective to bring to the storytelling.
True. I would like to add something to that, which is the sort of the challenge of a producer director to abandon footage that's been shot. You know, that's sometimes you feel that you want to include as much as you've put an effort into filming. And that's another way in which I think Susan was very helpful. We had to abandon some people. And of course, that was more difficult for me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right. Kind of kill your baby, so to speak.
Exactly.
So I was so impressed with IRMI's inner strength, her adaptability, her instincts. And there's so many examples of this in the film, from her leaving Nazi Germany to surviving the ship's bombing and grieving the loss of her first family, to losing your dad, her second husband, and then moving back to New York with 2 young children in 1957 as a single mom. I'm wondering, Veronica, can you talk a little more about what kind of mother she was? Maybe something that's not in the film?
Well, I wish Irene were in on this, because you develop different roles as children in relation to parents, and I think both Irene and I would experience IRMI in any case as a very dominant parent, dominant in the sense that she loomed large in our lives. She was very, very, very close to our friends. She stayed very young because her connection with us included her connection with our friends. And so she was a very open mother. And was active with us. I mean, from even before our dad died, and we were kids in Versailles. I mean, you see how she drove us to school every day. She took us to museums. She took us to concerts. What the film doesn't reflect, perhaps as much as it was true as time went on, was that she was she was lonely, and we were her source of closest companionship. And my sister really weathered that because she was in New York, I was in California. And what's not in it is the extent to which the phone calls that we have in there have a certain poignancy and a certain warmth. They were extensive, and in some ways disruptive.
Yeah.
So we didn't go there in the film. I think we made choices not to unravel or say too much about how in some ways hard it was for her to age, although she did it very, very gracefully.
Yeah, I think you do allude to that, you know, the increased anxiety as she gets older. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I was wondering, a lot of children of survivors talk about protecting their parents from more pain. And was this something you were conscious of at an early age?
I no, not conscious, but absolutely actively doing. There was just no, by not conscious, I mean, we didn't say to each other or to ourselves, but it was really our modus operandi. We were committed to avoiding pain for IRMI, and it took different ways of being for each of us. I was a comedian. My idea was to make her laugh. This was the way that it released my anxiety about her sadness. I want to just bring in one thing in relation to that, which is what I really, really experienced in making this film, was that for the first time, I could really feel my mother's pain. I could really feel her loss. I'd spent so much time wanting to avoid her feeling that, or, it's this absurd thing to say, of course, and, maybe misdirected, but making this film allowed me to fully understand the extent of her loss, something that we didn't really talk about together.
Okay, yeah. I was amazed by the personal archive that you had of your dad and your sister at school in France. Were these home movies or 16
Yes, it was one home movie. My mother made a surprise birthday present to my father when he turned 50, and that was the movie. And she just had the idea, and was like 1951 in France. She got a cinematographer in Versailles, and she just did it.
Wow.
And the miracle, in a sense, is that the movie survived. It sort of hung around in the can, and it wasn't until Mouvette. I don't know if you know Mouvette in San Francisco, but they're just masterful. And they took this 16 millimeter and they just made it work, made something out of it. So that's where that comes from.
Okay. Can you guys talk about the use of music and how it contributed to telling this story?
Susan, you do that.
Oh, I would love to, because that was a real turning point, I think, in making this film. Veronica and I both respond to music and use music in a similar way, I would say. And we had scored the film using a lot of existing music and classical music mostly. And we had a very developed soundtrack. But at a point that was close to when the film was picture edited, we made the decision. It had been sort of a dormant decision, but we really, for lots of reasons, felt that the film would really benefit from an original score, from a composer working with us. And to cut to the chase, we found the most perfect person to work with, who not only really heard what we had tried to do with a you know, with a score made out of needle drops, as we would say, and brought the film to a whole nother level, I really feel, because of what he contributed with music. And you know, he's just extremely talented, but he really tuned in. He tuned into IRMI, he tuned into the things that we were trying to say. And the music really tells a story with the story we had created, but amplifies it and gives it a continuity, and it gives it a unique personality, which is what she is. And it's just, we're just thrilled with the music.
I'd like to add one thing to that, which is that I was actually very resistant to having a composer because I was attached to the music that I felt my mother listened to. You know, I was attached to extra filmic connections with the music between my mother and the music. And I just, you know, I just was holding on to that. And I have to say that it was just a revelation for me. So Susan really, really pushed to have a composer and explained what a composer could do. And of course, Todd delivered that. So it was something I really, really learned making this film, that what a composer can contribute is just immeasurable.
Mm. Yeah. I'm going to read you some questions we have a lot of questions from the audience. Veronica, was your mother able to talk about her feelings as she grew older, especially about her first family?
She acknowledged her her anxiety that she attributed to her loss, what had happened. She was an anxious person. And as she got older, she became more and more anxious about our safety, more and more demanding that we stay safe and stay in touch. She talked about, and sort of the shortcut, or she acknowledged that she was depressed, but it never came to analyzing why. And I have to say, you know, from the point of view of a grown-up person now, and there's certain things that neither Irene nor I did that, you know, other adult people would have done in relation to their mother, which is to actually probe and to let her feelings out. We didn't somehow go there.
Here's another question. Did you ever hit a wall and feel like you couldn't really tell IRMI's story?
No.
Okay, that's quick. This is from Greg. There was a suggestion that Veronica's sister, your sister Veronica, that that IRMI's life had more loss and disappointment than IRMI documented in her book. Could you elaborate further?
Yes, I think we put that piece at the beginning because we wanted to establish early on that there was pain involved in our mother's life, and that that it was an element in our relationship and in her life. We did not explain what that was early on. I think what Irene is referring to much more specifically is the tragedy of losing her family. And indeed, we did have more details than what we tell in the film. And I think Irene is referring to that. Over time, we did, of course, find out more. And while I'm saying that we were quite discreet with her, we certainly, over time, felt more comfortable probing, and she felt more comfortable telling us. So that, for example, she held both her children in the water. You know, this is something that was just terrible for her to lose them that way. And that's not something that we knew right away. It's something we learned over time. And that's what Irene's referring to. And IRMI is quite discreet in her memoir. She did keep the idea of her grandchildren in mind. You know, she did contain herself because she wanted her grandchildren to, well, it was a particular audience for her, and so she was more contained. But generally, she was more contained anyway.
Mm.
Sorry if I'm talking too much.
No. This is your moment. A little bit related to that, as children, when did you realize there had been another family before yours?
Always.
Always.
We just knew it always.
Okay. A lighter question. How did you get Hannah Shaigula to narrate? She's amazing. I had that question too.
Well, I have a dear friend in Berlin who's well connected to the art world and the film world, and I asked him whether he could get permission for me to have Hannah Shaigula's email, which he did, and she gave permission. And I wrote to her. It was very, very simple, like that. I wrote to her. I spent time in France. Hannah Shaigula lives in Paris, and we were able to connect in Paris one summer. It's about 2 summers ago, and the connection was a very, very warm one. And I gave her my mother's memoir, and she immediately took to it. She's also someone who felt, it was both, she was making a gift to us, and it was a gift for her too. She felt that she could participate in the story of a Jewish woman as someone who'd been on the other side.
Right.
In some way. She herself, not even her family, but yeah. So, but yeah, I don't want to go into anecdotes.
Okay. Yeah, no. So this is from Nancy, who says this was a perfect film, which I agree. And she's asking, I just lost it, sorry. How did you decide, and why did you decide not to interview yourself on camera, but just to have you be the narrator?
Susie? Please.
Oh, it seemed throughout, that question did come up. And I guess these are very, it's a very personal feeling that Veronica had. But in a way, I supported that because she was the filmmaker. She was the person making the film. I was an extension of that. I was collaborating with her. But, that personage, the person behind the camera, is a form of participation. The decision to be in front of the camera, obviously, I could have interviewed her in front of the camera, but I did do a certain amount of interviewing with Veronica on tape, which is actually how a lot of the narration and her voice developed in the film. And there was just something about it that was authentically, that's the way she wanted it to be felt. And it also felt right to me, but I don't think there's a totally intellectual reason.
Sorry, Nancy, not to answer it myself. I think Susan answers it, and it was just an intuition. I felt strongly that in some ways I could be more intimate behind it just with my voice. I want to just add one thing, which is that when I started making the film, I was my mother's voice. In other words, I read my mother's memoir, and I felt very, very strongly that was the right thing. And really, friends convinced me. They said, no, it has to be it has to be a voice other than your own. And then as my own voice developed in the film, it became understandable that I couldn't be both. So that's something I gave up as part of my being in the film. And it was a very good decision.
Yeah, I actually think it was made the film stronger to have you as the narration and only the narration. I think, anyway, I thought it would may who knows, it could have diluted that a little. So we have time for one more question. And this is from Sarah. Can you tell us about your friendship, Veronica and Susan? How did you meet? How much have you worked together before?
Well, we started to answer that question. We met as we went to a wonderful high school in New York City, and small school, and we got to know each other there, and we continued to have a friendship over all these years. And Veronica and I, well, independently became filmmakers and editors, and somehow shared our enthusiasm for cinema and for filmmaking and documentary filmmaking. And so we were very in tune with each other's work, even if we weren't working together. You know, we would share each other's work and our process and so forth. And I worked with Veronica on her film about KPFA. I edited that, she directed it. And that was the only other time that we sort of officially collaborated.
Yeah, and it was very, very essential collaboration. And I think that might have been Sarah Cahill who asked that question. I don't know.
No, I don't have a last name. But anyway, on that last note of collaboration, I want to thank you both for a wonderful, amazing film. Thank you for letting us screen it, the world premiere. I think I didn't read you all the comments. I just read you the questions, but the comments are overwhelmingly positive, and people are really taken by this story and by your filmmaking. I think your filmmaking is just impeccable. So thanks again, and good luck for the for the life of the rest of the film. I hope it has a long life.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in.